Hello and welcome to Collective Basketball Agreements Podcast. I am your host, Joe Manganiello, and we're keeping it rolling here. I've been previewing the 2025 WNBA season, really recapping the free agency portion of the offseason as I'm recording all of these previews in early March 2025. Today, we are talking about the Connecticut Sun, one of the more accomplished WNBA franchises, particularly in recent history. They're coming off of a 28-12 season, second best in the WNBA's Eastern Conference. As we know, they did not win the championship last year. They ran into the Minnesota Lynx, a very competitive 5-game series. Ultimately, they were bounced. Then the Lynx went to the finals. They lost to the Liberty. And here we are, going to be a much different season at Mohegan Sun than past years. We're going to get more into the weeds on what that is all about. But let's just finish up these fundamentals. Last season, they had a 105 offensive rating. That was fourth in the W. More importantly, they had the best defensive rating in the league, 96.4. So much veteran talent, so much continuity, acumen, understanding of personnel. One of the best coaches in the world, Stephanie White. Well, again, a lot has changed. As we look at their financial fundamentals, unlike some of the other teams, that we've discussed so far, only 5 guaranteed contracts on the books. There's a 4th-year option that they picked up for Olivia Nelson-Ododa. But otherwise, most of their roster right now are unguaranteed contracts, combination of unprotected salaries, rookie scale players, a fair number of training camp invitations. This is a roster that's in flux and is going to continue to change, going to continue to evolve. They're not going to be able to keep every player on Spotrac on the roster for opening night, for example. Training camp's going to probably be very competitive amongst young players and international players that are invited. Right now, they have $481,000 in cap space, so a lot of flexibility in terms of future spending. Now, who are they going to spend that money on and in what context? We're going to get a little bit more into that. And finally, Connecticut does have the number 8 pick, as well as the number 25 and number 36 picks in this upcoming draft. I wouldn't be shocked if between now and mid-April, they're actually able to come into more draft capital by trading some of their other veterans. And I know for damn sure those veterans and their agents are going to be calling in the meantime, asking, hey, you find a trade yet? You find a trade yet? My client does not want to be here. And look, I want to say just off the bat, I have nothing personally against Connecticut. I have nothing negative to say from my own personal experiences. And everything that I'm going to say in this episode and in future episodes is my prognostication, my analysis on what I think the tenor and the vibe and the feelings in the WNBA as it pertains to, talent. Do players want to play in Connecticut? Do coaches want to be in Connecticut? Do agents want their clients in Connecticut? I reference Mohegan Sun. I've been there. I've attended games at Mohegan Sun. There are better basketball venues. There are better basketball venues in the WNBA, for sure. There are better basketball venues in the state of California. There are stories about the lacking facilities in Connecticut relative to other WNBA franchises, and how players talking amongst themselves, sharing examples, how collectively the players and the players union might be Especially now that we're in a post-Unrivaled world where you see in America a league of women's basketball players garnering so much attention and so many sponsorships, and it is going to be an arms race for the foreseeable future in the WNBA. Only going to be 13 teams this year. We're going to be up to 15 by 2026. More teams to come down the line. There are cities and ownership groups and all sorts of investors and all sorts of stakeholders lining up to be in the business of women's basketball. It's a beautiful thing. It's an incredible thing. The challenge for Connecticut to kind of bring us back into focus, there isn't a Connecticut team in Major League Baseball or the NFL or the NBA. If this current ownership group wants to continue to grow the franchise and they want to do so in Connecticut, they're going to have to find ways to win back support and morale. And look, I don't want to sound so gloomy, so doom and gloom. This team came off of a very competitive stretch of seasons where they nearly won a championship. Alternatively, if this episode is ostensibly a recap of what the Connecticut Sun did or what was done to them in free agency, not a lot of positive things to talk about. So why don't we just rip the Band-Aid off? Connecticut Sun lose head coach Stephanie White to the Indiana Fever. Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, I don't know if you heard of them. Indiana, not exactly Tokyo, not exactly Paris, France, but the basketball and the investments that are being made there were certainly a lot for Stephanie White to consider. And then on the floor, Connecticut lose Alyssa Thomas, DeWanna Bonner, Brianna Jones, Dejanay Carrington. That's a lot. That's a lot of talent to lose. And I don't think that it is too harsh to say that in a year where we're going to have an expansion franchise in Golden State, where we have a Washington Mystics team that is going to be primarily rookie scale players, and their franchise is still very much in the early stages of a rebuild. We have a Dallas Wings franchise that they earned the number one pick by losing games. And I'm a big fan of Paige Beckers and hope that she does go pro and go to Dallas this upcoming year. And they have great players. They have, some very, very good and established players on roster. But, I think Dallas is going to be, I think that there is a clear bottom four now for this upcoming year. There's a bottom tier. Connecticut is in that bottom tier. Golden State, Dallas, Connecticut, these are the bottom tier teams. And so what does Connecticut do? What is next for them? The next thing to point out is who is still left on this roster. And, we called out, what guaranteed contracts are still on the books. Marina Mabry at $210,000, Natasha Cloud at $200,000 was acquired via trade, which we got to talk about in more detail, the mega trade that saw Natasha come to Connecticut. They signed Tina Charles as a veteran, age 36. She's back in Connecticut now, $170,000 salary. And then a lot of more unproven players. We'll get a little bit more into the weeds in a second, but let's talk about this major trade. You got a deal where Alyssa Thomas goes to the Phoenix Mercury. It's what she wanted. She handpicked that situation. Connecticut was able to find a strong deal in terms of what they got back. Connecticut is able to add J.C. Sheldon, recently the number 5 overall pick from Dallas. They get the number 8 overall pick from Indiana. They acquire Rebecca Allen, who then they later traded to Chicago. And they get Natasha Cloud. And I think, at first blush, just as a it's great to get a quality basketball player back in return. Natasha Cloud is well paid for a reason. At age 33, she's done a lot in her career thus far. I think when you hear Natasha Cloud's comments coming out of this trade, I think it really does put the whole thing in perspective. So I'm just going to read here. So Cloud told the press, quote, "The last few weeks have been a whirlwind, to say the least." And again, this is her, talking about coming out of this trade, kind of being blindsided by that. Only 1 year after signing with the Phoenix Mercury as a free agent, she had been with the Washington Mystics for 8 years before that. So to continue, quote, "It's really hard to be loyal to organizations in this situation when you can just up and move no matter what. And so that was really hard for me. Uprooting my family to the West Coast, being told I was going to retire as a Phoenix Mercury, and to then be shipped out and find out with you guys on social media, that was really fun for me." Sarcasm. Continuing, quote, "That part of it was really hard, even harder than being sent to Connecticut as a 33-year-old. It just wasn't what I expected." It's hard. It's hard to hear that if you're a Connecticut fan. And in closing, quote, "Not for the tenure that I had, not for the loyalty that I presented. So I just want the best situation for myself and my family moving forward. And I just want to be in an organization that truly invests from top to bottom. Facilities, team, location, all of that. I want to compete for championships," end quote. I mean, that's scathing. That is scathing. And it is not, I think the way I'm going to choose to interpret that is that her ire was more pointed at Phoenix, right? They say what they need to say to get her to sign the previous year, and then they go back on their word. That's her perspective, and trade her to Connecticut as a 33-year-old, quote unquote. Connecticut, catching strays. I mean, you got to feel for Natasha, right? In terms of talking about player perspective, when these types of shrewd business moments and opportunities present themselves, if you're Phoenix and you could turn Natasha Cloud into Alyssa Thomas, you do it. But Natasha's well within her right to put on the public record, like, hey, like, never gonna forget what they did, and other athletes should know. Now, as it pertains to her present situation with Connecticut, I'm sure behind the scenes and off the record, she is having similar discussions and similar moments where she and her representation say, so, listen, that whole I'm a 33-year-old vet trying to win championships, but I'm in this just really dismal situation in Connecticut. Yeah. The short answer is I don't know. I don't know what Connecticut's pain tolerance is going to be. The other player to mention here is Marina Mabrey, age 28, the 13th highest paid player in the WNBA. Connecticut traded the number 10 pick, what ended up being the number 10 pick in this upcoming draft, to Chicago to acquire Mabrey ahead of the postseason. Right? They're trying to win they're trying to win a championship. They trade for Mabrey. I'm sure Mabrey was thrilled to play alongside Alyssa Thomas, DeWanna Bonner, Brianna Jones, etc. Well, can't be as thrilled when you're the last, one of the last people standing. Last year the Sun struggled against top tier teams, a 4-8 record against the league's best. Ultimately, Connecticut lost in the playoffs. I'm sure Mabrey, I don't have to say I'm sure, because she did publicly make a trade demand, and that was denied by Connecticut. Connecticut has come out and said there's no intention to move Mabrey, and I assume the same goes for Cloud. Right now, they want to retain these veterans, go into the season, see what they got, give their new coaching staff an opportunity to try some things on the floor, and give the ticket holders and the fans and the folks going to these games in Connecticut something to root for. We'll see. We'll see how that works out. I mean, I do think fans are going to be pretty thrilled to have Tina Charles back. I know just from my time with the New York Liberty that Tina Charles is a fan favorite wherever she goes. It is really one of the more beloved players of her generation. And so I don't think it's impossible for Connecticut to have competent play on the floor. Two really solid guard wings, a center like Tina that can score and rebound. Problem is the W has just gotten so much better, and the morale of this team, unless it's in tip-top shape, which it's not going to be, I have my doubts that this is. I just have my doubts that Connecticut is going to have that much success and will almost inevitably be active in the trade market with these players. But, let the professionals do their job. I do think that there's an argument that you hold on to these players and you wait for the market to materialize around them. You don't trade these players from a place of desperation. Now, from the agent perspective, from the player perspective, trade me yesterday. What are you talking about? I don't want to be here. So collectively, right, this podcast, Collective Basketball Agreements, collectively, there's going to be some tension there between these different parties. One brief note, Tina Charles, $170,000 deal. I thought that was pretty solid. Pretty similar to Steph Dolson in Washington, Mercedes Russell in LA. So I thought that was a pretty good value for her talent. Let's zoom out a little bit. I mentioned before, Connecticut, they do have the number 8 pick in this upcoming draft. I think they're going to be able to get someone really solid. They have J.C. Sheldon now, the number 5 pick from last year. She's going to get more reps. She was definitely like a workhorse, high effort guard at Ohio State, and I think that she could be a very good WNBA lead guard. I don't know that she has the ceiling of some other guards from recent drafts or this upcoming draft, but I think she's going to be strong, solid. She's just so smart and so heady. So get her on the floor, have her, work out her mistakes. That'll be a fun project. Connecticut has 4 players under contract for 2026, which is actually, it's tied for the most in the league. And as I've referenced a bunch of times already, for the most part, players are looking to get back into free agency in 2026 when the new CBA hits, and there's going to be a lot more money, by all accounts, to go get. And so it doesn't make sense to lock in a contract for future years when the CBA is going to allow for more pay as a byproduct of negotiation and collective bargaining. So Connecticut having players, rookie scale players and players under contract, that's a good thing for them. I think that Lindsey Allen coming in at age 29 in the Beck Allen trade, that's interesting. Beck Allen, a little bit older. I think her getting to Chicago and being on a team that could win right away made more sense. They probably were doing a favor to Beck Allen, which is probably not what Natasha Cloud and Marina Mabrey want to hear. But I think Lindsey Allen actually has a chance to play well, get a lot of reps, get some shots up, and then maybe she could be a trade candidate mid-season. And they also got the rights to Nina Milic. And I think to really give some praise here, I think one of my favorite signings of free agency was Diamond DeShields going to Connecticut, $115,000 deal unguaranteed, very, very reasonable. I mean, if you just do some simple math dividing the salary cap, which is about $1.5 million by 12 roster spots, average roster spot's going to be about $122,000. So Connecticut is getting a 6'1", age 29, former number 3 overall pick for a very reasonable salary. And just to go over, Diamond's bio a little bit here, she was an all-star in 2019. She scored 25 points in her playoff debut. This is someone who has had success at the W level. Now, had a bit of a tumultuous stretch. There was a tumor located in her spine in 2020, and the public learned about that years after, but she had to have surgery for that. There were tough times in Chicago. She ultimately lost her starting job in 2021, 3 teams in 3 years. Then she missed all of 2023 with a knee injury. But when you look at her per 36-minute stats and try to project, what would it look like if Diamond got real playing time? Per 36, her career averages are 17 points, 5.5 rebounds, 3 assists, 1.5 steals. A productive guard, someone that can do a little bit of everything. Would love to see what a full season in Connecticut getting consistent playing time would look like for her as a shooter. I'm a fan of that move. I think that was a really good piece of business for Connecticut. And so that's a positive note to end on. But wait. I do have to say this. The Sun have qualified for the WNBA playoffs in 15 of their 21 seasons in Connecticut. But despite this, they are the oldest remaining franchise without a championship title. Of course, the New York Liberty, an original WNBA franchise, they won their first championship this past year. The buck now has been passed to the Connecticut Sun. I am not really going out on a limb when I say that I think it's going to be a tough one. I think it's going to be a tough summer for them. I think that there will be trades along the way. I think that if they are blown away by offers for Cloud or Mabry and they can get even better draft position, they should think about it, because the WNBA is too good. Only 8 teams make the playoffs. There aren't, there are more than 8 good teams in the league. There are probably close to 8 teams that think they can win the title this year. And so Connecticut's not going to be in that mix. They're not. And I think the sooner they realize that, and the sooner they really forecast out into the future, bringing in young players, rookie scale deals for multiple seasons, that's the pathway out of what could be a really hellish moment, or a hellish season. I mean, it's a hellish moment. I mean, I read you the Natasha Cloud quote. Like, it's a hellish moment, but to avoid a hellish stretch of seasons, to get on a righteous path as soon as possible, knowing that they're not going to be a free agent destination anytime soon either. And I don't want to speculate too much on Connecticut as a market, or Mohegan Sun as an arena, or the arms race for better facilities and training staffs, and where Connecticut stands in that. I think player quotes and national reports, any fan of the league that wants to follow that stuff can get to it. But I think in closing here with Connecticut, for the good of the game, I would just love to see this team get as young as possible, become an opportunity destination for young players and veterans like Diamond DeShields, who are looking for a chance to establish themselves or reestablish themselves. And that's what I'm going to be looking for most in Connecticut. So shout out to them. Next up will be the Indiana Fever. We'll be talking about Stephanie White's new team. So stick around and check out that next episode.